we will have our scripture readings, and Rolanda is going to read the first one. It's Exodus chapter 34, 29 to 35.
Exodus 34, 29 to 35. Now it was so, when Moses came down from Mount Sinai, and the 2 tablets of the testimony were in Moses' hand when he came down from the mountain, that Moses did not know that the skin of his face shone while he talked with him. So when Aaron and all the children of Israel saw Moses, behold, the skin of his face shone, and they were afraid to come near him. Then Moses called to them, and Aaron and all the rulers of the congregation returned to him, and Moses talked with them. Afterward, all the children of Israel came near, and he gave them as commandments all that the Lord had spoken with him on Mount Sinai. And when Moses had finished speaking with them, he put a veil on his face. But whenever Moses went in before the Lord to speak with him, he would take the veil off until he came out. And he would come out and speak to the children of Israel whatever he had been commanded. And whenever the children of Israel saw the face of Moses, that the skin of Moses' face shone, then Moses would put the veil on his face again until he went in to speak with him. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. Thank you. Yeah. Now we're going to do the psalm reading in unison. Psalm 99. Okay, together. The Lord reigns, let the people tremble. He dwells between the cherubim, let the earth be moved. The Lord is great in Zion, he is high above all the peoples. Let them praise your great and awesome name. He is holy. The king's strength also loves justice. You have established equity. You have executed justice and righteousness in Jacob. Exalt the Lord our God, and worship at his footstool. He is holy. Moses and Aaron were among his priests, and Samuel was among those who called upon his name. They called upon the Lord, and he answered them. He spoke to them in the cloudy pillar. He kept his testimonies and the ordinance he gave them. You answered them, O Lord our God. You were to them the God who forgives, though you took vengeance on their deeds. Exalt the Lord our God, and worship at his holy hill, for the Lord our God is holy. And our third reading is from 2 Corinthians 3. Pearl is going to read this for us. You want to read it off the screen or the paper?
Okay. Therefore, since we have such hope, we use great boldness of speech, unlike Moses, who put a veil over his face so that the children of Israel could not look steadily at the end of what was passing away. But their minds were blinded, for until this day the same veil remains unlifted in the reading of the Old Testament, because the veil is taken away in Christ. But even to this day, when Moses is read, a veil lies on their heart. Nevertheless, when one turns to the Lord, the veil is taken away. Now the Lord is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. But we all, with unveiled face, beholding as in a mirror of the glory of the Lord, are being transformed into the same image from glory to glory, just as the Spirit of the Lord. Therefore, since we have this ministry, as we have received mercy, we do not lose heart, but we have renounced the hidden things of shame, not walking in craftiness, nor handling the word of God deceitfully, but by manifestation of the truth, commending ourselves to every man's conscience in the sight of God. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. And our fourth reading is from the Gospel of Luke. Alex is going to come and read that for us. Luke chapter 9.
And now it came to pass, about 8 days after these saying, that he took Peter, John, and James, and went up on the mountain to pray. As he prayed, the appearance of his face was altered, and his robe became white as glistening. And behold, 2 men talked with him, who were Moses and Elijah, who appeared in glory and spoke of his decease which he was about to accomplish at Jerusalem. But Peter and those with him were heavy with sleep. And when they were fully awake, they saw his glory and the 2 men who stood with him. Then it happened, as they were parting from him, that Peter said to Jesus, "Master, it is good for us to be here. And let us make 3 tabernacles, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah," not knowing what he said. While he was saying this, a cloud came and overshadowed them, and they were fearful as they entered the cloud. And a voice came out of the cloud, saying, "This is my beloved Son, hear him." When the voice had ceased, Jesus was found alone. But they kept quiet and told no one in those days any of the things they had seen. Now it happened on the next day, when they had come down from the mountain, that a great multitude met him. Suddenly a man from the multitude cried out, saying, "Teacher, I implore you, look on my son, for he is my only child. And behold, a spirit seizes him, and he suddenly cries out. It convulses him so that he foams at the mouth, and it departs from him with great difficulty, bruising him. So I implore your disciple to cast it out, but they could not." Then Jesus answered and said, "O faithless and perverse generation, how long shall I be with you and bear with you? Bring your son here." And as he was still coming, the demon threw him down and convulsed him. Then Jesus rebuked the unclean spirit and healed the child and gave him back to his father. And they were all amazed at the majesty of God. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. We have a hymn that I'm going to sing before my message, and we're talking about the family of God. I'm so glad I've been washed in the fountain, cleansed by his blood, joined heirs with Jesus as we travel this side. I'm a part of the family of God. I'm so glad I'm a part of the family of God. I've been washed in the fountain, cleansed by his word, joined heirs with Jesus as we travel this side. I'm a part of the family of God. Amen. You may be seated. The 4 passages that we read this morning are full of sermons. As I looked through them, I thought, now, which theme should I follow in these 4? And these are the 4 scriptures that are promoted or presented by the Presbyterian Church. Every Sunday in their liturgy, they have these 4 scriptures that they choose. And as I was reflecting on this, I realized that the transfiguration of Christ is a very, very important event. And I wished in my childhood, as I was growing up, that it would have been highlighted really directly with Easter, because it is. And I'm going to bring that out in my message this morning. I don't think I really realized that until I did some research, how the transfiguration of Christ, that moment, that historic moment, was very, very much related to the events of Easter, time-wise. Yes, it's not too early to think about Easter. 40 days, the transfiguration comes 40 days before the events of Easter, before the crucifixion. 40 days are very important as we think of the reality of that expression, that time period of the 40 days. The number 40 showcases the examples of God's intent and the direction in his people's lives, The number 40 in the Bible appears to symbolize a completion and an accomplishment, a beginning and an end of something that is predicted, something that is there as a period of time in which special things are going to be accomplished. The reality of God's purpose is understood in those 40 days. The number seven is it talks more about the perfection of God, how God completes things. He himself is that perfection. And in the 7, we have the 7 days of creation, the 6th and the 7th day of rest, completion in another sense. But the 40 has, as we see, 40 days that rained, 40 days and nights in the days of Noah and the ark, 40 years in the desert, the children of Israel. Moses, the life of Moses was divided into 3 sections of 40. From 1 to 40, he was there in Egypt as a prince, in Pharaoh's palace. At 40, he decides he needs to deliver the children of Israel, makes a serious error, and goes off into the desert for 40 years. At 80, God appears to him in the burning bush and says, Moses, I want you back in Egypt. I want you to talk to Pharaoh. And then for 40 years, he's there leading the people out of Egypt and towards the promised land. And at 120, Moses is taken off by himself and he dies. 40 days, Jonah said to the city of Nineveh. In 40 days, 40 days Jesus was fasting in the wilderness. 40 days to prepare for that event of his temptation. Yes, 40 days that he would face and now 40 days from the time of his transfiguration until his crucifixion. And it was in there that he was preparing for his greatest temptation as he faced evil. Evil in its most, if I can use that word, in its most graphic and purest way. Evil without any bars, any doors closed. It was full-on evil in its full darkness and its lie and in its deception to the greatest power that it could generate. And then 40 days that Jesus was on earth after his resurrection, 40 days to complete, 40 days in which he spoke with the disciples. He appeared to over 500, it says in the scriptures. And in that time, he witnessed to them that he was not a ghost. He said, give me food. I'm in a transformed, glorified body, one that you are also going to have someday. Well, the transfiguration is considered one of the 6, as it were, the 6 milestones of Jesus' life according to the Gospels. His birth, his baptism, and his transfiguration, his crucifixion, his resurrection, and his ascension. These were the things that really highlight, in a sense, Jesus' life. His ministry certainly highlights, but these events were the milestones in Jesus' life. The transfiguration is a pivotal point in Jesus' ministry, providing a glimpse into his divine nature and affirming his identity as the Son of God, but it is also that profound connection that he has with humanity, his humanity, how he loved this world, he loved his creation. We read in the passage in Luke how he was up there on the mountain. He had taken with him Peter and James and John. And then there was something very special and unique that happened. The presence of Moses and Elijah. For the presence of Moses and Elijah. Two people came to counsel him and encourage him, not two angels. Two people that had been leaders. They experienced all of God's presence with them in a very supernatural way. But they were still people living that out here on earth. And when Christ was facing Golgotha, as he was facing the courtroom and with the Sanhedrin there in the temple, and then with Pilate, as he was facing the reality of that Judas kiss, as he was facing the reality of the disciples that didn't stick with him, as it were. Yes, as he was facing that, there were two men that came to see him and to encourage him. Now, we know what it's like, huh? When the older, experienced players come, as when the hockey, we had the 4 nations playing off. And what happened when the Canadians were getting ready to play? They called up some of the old veterans. Yeah, they called in Yvan Cournoyer, Paul Henderson, Serge Savard, Carey Price. Come and stand in the room and talk with these guys. And it's not so much what you're going to say, but just your presence is going to inspire these guys to take it up another notch. What did they say to the players as they stood in that room? These players that were dressed there, proudly wearing that Canadian sweater. What would they say to these players? Tell them the skills of playing hockey? No, these guys knew how to play hockey. They were the cream of the cream, creme de la creme. Yes. Perhaps what would they say? I don't know. As I sat there at my desk, I closed my eyes. What did they say? Did Serge look over at him and say, listen, fellas, I know what it's like to make the perfect pass, and I also know what it's like to make the stupid pass and to miss the perfect pass. Fellas, don't sweat the small stuff. Get in there and play it. Don't take stupid penalties. I took one, but don't do it. It's not worth it. Suck it up. Yeah, as we say. I had to learn to play with the other guys too. You guys are all on different teams playing against each other. Now you're going to have to play together. Can you do that, fellas? I had to learn that. I had to learn to learn the hard way, but I had to learn it. It's the only way you're going to win. Yeah. Yeah. And when the other guy starts, teasing you, saying stuff about you, don't listen to it. Don't listen to it. And I think maybe that was perhaps the one that Jesus had to really, and I'll get into that in a minute, but that listening to that attack of the lies, listening to the insults would have been perhaps the one that is most, because when you start dialoguing with the guy that's insulting you, you're never going to win. You're never going to win. No, as those fellows were brought in from the veterans, we know that something must have been said that inspired them and put a spark into their skates, into their step, because we know that the Canadians went on to win that game. Yes, to whom would Christ turn? To whom could Christ turn as he faces that historic moment that he has come? The whole purpose of his coming was now to face Golgotha. And you know, we talk about the death of Christ. We talk about how it was terrible. We talk about how it was suffering beyond anything that we can imagine. But the real temptation, all of that suffering, was to get him to break. It was to get him to lash out at God and say it's not fair, and accuse God of being unjust. Once that step had been made, then death would come automatically. Satan wanted him to break. And Satan poured on Christ every physical, every mental, every spiritual amount of suffering that it was possible. He had to be the perfect lamb. And the perfect lamb had to be without sin. He had to fulfill right those 3 hours plus on the cross. He had to fulfill it without sin. Not just his previous, not just the 33 years previous to that. But now was the hour when he had to be the perfect lamb right through to the end. The lamb had to be perfect for that blood to satisfy the justice, the death to satisfy the justice of God. That is the part that you and I, sometimes we need to just pause and think of our temptations. The temptations that come our way. The temptations that sneak up on us. The temptations that find that hook on us again. Yeah. Think of Christ. And as he now thinks of all the temptations he's faced, will he now still have what it takes to be able to stand straight and to be the perfect lamb? And to whom does he turn? He turns to two men. He asks, I don't know how this, when I'm imagining here in my mind, my sanctified imagination goes up. Father, could you send Moses and Elijah? I'd like to talk with them. Yeah. They, as men, I'm a man. Physically, I'm facing the cross. I know what a crucifixion is all about. I've seen them. The Romans would crucify them. It was a common experience. Read the history. One of the cruelest ways of trying to somehow put fear into the people. Anybody that wants to revolt against Caesar, this is what you're expecting. And you saw them hanging on the roadside. It was a sad, sad way to, yeah. Jesus knew what he was facing. He tried to tell them. Tried to tell the disciples, and they wouldn't believe. No, Jesus, you're not going to go. I'll defend you, Peter said. I'll defend you. They didn't understand. Did Jesus have a prayer to the Father sometime in there and say, Father, send me down Moses and Elijah? Well, if you remember the story of Moses and Elijah, they were two men that failed. Moses, in that moment when he angry, the people were on complaining, and instead of speaking to the rock the second time, the first time God said, you may strike the rock with your staff. The second time, Moses, guys want water? I'll give you water. Bang, bang, and he hits the rock twice. Out comes water. people got water. But God said, Moses, what are you doing? I told you to speak to the rock. And Moses realizes he's failed. And Elijah. You remember what about Elijah? Yeah. I was tired. Physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally. I was tired. I was finished. Yeah, I confronted 450 prophets of Baal, and yeah, they couldn't call, they were empty. They had no power. They couldn't call down fire from heaven. And I had them destroyed. I had them killed. They were false prophets. And then the queen Jezebel said, yeah, just like you did to those prophets, I'm going to do to you. And she hit me. I just folded like as we say, a deck of cards. And he ran. What do two men that failed have to tell to Jesus? Well, we know that God forgave both of them, Moses and Elijah. God didn't reject them. He forgave them. They confessed. They dealt with their issues. But what do these two men to have to tell to Jesus? Let me ask you, if Jesus had asked you to come and be his counselor, and he sat there in front of you and said, I've got this mission to accomplish. What's your word of advice for me? What would you tell him? Well, Moses likely said, Jesus, I lost patience. And I can only say that if I could go back and relive that moment, yeah. But you've got it before you. Jesus, you're going to listen, you're going to have to complete this task. The people will turn against you. They will accuse you. They will say all kinds of insults and accusations against you, lies. They will have seen the miracles, just as those people saw open the Red Sea and food was provided, and then along comes the little shortage of water, and they're ready to, yeah. Jesus, that's the moment when you're going to have to just believe in your mission, believe in your calling, and believe that God is with you. You're going to have to believe. That is what I would tell you, Moses said. Elijah, yes, Jesus, you did miracles, I did miracles. I know what it's like. I've done a few myself. But the greatest miracle that you are now going to have to perform is the miracle for yourself, for your will, for your love, for the mission that you have come to complete. The greatest miracle is now before you. And the greatest miracle will be to overcome that sense of tiredness, that sense of that you are the only one and that God has abandoned even you. As Elijah, as you remember the story, I'm the only one that's left. I'm the only one that's left. And it wasn't true because God said, no, there are more, many more that believe. But that feeling that you are the only one and that's not fair, Elijah said, beware of that temptation, Jesus. I'm assuming, as I said, maybe that's what they said to him. But we know that they came. How they came, we don't know. It's a mysterious, but it's just like all the other those moments in Christ's life and in the scriptures. We accept them by faith. And I also accept them that these actually literally happened because I know in my own personal life what it means to feel the presence of God and to feel that the forgiveness and the joy and to feel that something that is far, far greater. I know what that feels like. And so I know that this was true. I believe it. Because the reality of what Christ was facing was true. His crucifixion is an historical event, sort of proven. And so here we are. They are having a very, very serious conversation. Now here's what happens when the disciples, when they wake up. They realize that Christ he's there, shining, gleaming. He's in another form, another dimension. And they see Moses and they see Elijah and what's going on here? And it's a bright light. And Peter, in his typical kind of way, has an answer to this. Let's build 3 shrines. Let's build 3 shrines. Wow, this is great. We got one for Moses, one for Elijah, one for Jesus, and then after hearing the Father speak, hey, we can put the 4th one up. The Father spoke here. Yep. Oh boy, poor Peter. Jesus tells him, Peter, no, you haven't understood again. Get behind me, Peter. Get behind me. You're out there trying to lead. Get behind me, Peter. Get behind me. Yes, when that, the reality of Peter and let's build 3 shrines, as the title of my message was, what was it again here? Come on, David. Building relationships. Building relationships instead of shrines. Yes, that's what it was, what Jesus is far more interested in. Shrines will only be a distraction. Shrines will only be a distraction. And I say that humbly and quietly in a sense. You can put that's David's opinion. I know that people, when they go to visit the Holy Land, or they visit there in Montreal, and shrines, I've seen them, and I walk into those buildings as well, and I look, and there's a sense of awe. But there's also a sense of something very distant and very mysterious that doesn't really feel personal. Doesn't feel personal. Christ is a personal. He wants to make a relationship with us. He wants to have a relationship. Shrines are our understanding, and I believe God was against the people building a temple for himself. Then you'll think I'm in the temple. There will be a holy place in which we will do sacrifice. But don't build me a temple, God said. Well, they went ahead and they built the temple anyways. Then we know what happened. God had to destroy it twice. Because he says, you think that I'm in the temple. And we've got the temple here. And God surely will not allow his temple to be destroyed. And God said, no, that's not the way it works. I would much prefer that your body, and that's what he actually declared, your body be my temple, God said. And that's what he wants in the relationship with us. Yes, Peter didn't understand. He didn't understand what it was all about. And unfortunately, so many of us don't either. The event of the transfiguration is about spiritual, mental, and psychological, and sociological. Jesus is having a relationship with other humans. In his humanity, he sought out Moses and Elijah. I would ask you this morning, who do you seek out? You pray to God. You seek his peace. You seek his guidance. But is there someone meaningful to you? Someone that has been through the issues? Someone that in his vocation, he knows what you're going to be facing? Someone that has experienced something similar to you? As I am almost 80 years old, as I think back of the men and women in my life, at that particular moment in my life, I knew that God was with me, and as I prayed and so on and so forth. But I think of Sunday school teachers, I think of a pastor, I think of my parents, my mother, my father. I think of my sister, I think of school teachers. I think of one man, he was a superintendent of the Rockaway Mennonite Collegiate. And I went to him, had an issue. He knew what it was like to be in a career. He knew what it was like. He gave me very sound advice. Jesus, as he's facing the cross, he's looking for some people that will give him that kind of, I've been through it. Here is what you're going to experience. Here's what you're going to face. And to know what they spoke was the truth. They didn't exaggerate. They didn't embellish. They didn't try to impress you. Jesus knew that these two men had been through it. They knew, Elijah and Moses knew how Satan tricked them. And they said to Jesus, don't listen to all that stuff. And it says that Isaiah said he was silent like a lamb before her shears is dumb. He didn't get wrapped up in all that dialogue, that silly, stupid kind of conversation you get wrapped up in that tricks you, and the first thing you knew, you're like a dog chasing your tail. It doesn't go anyplace. No, Jesus knew that these two men were the ones that could help him, and he called on them. And he was transformed into their dimension, and they were brought into Jesus' dimension. Peter and the disciples recognized him. That is the mystery that you and I have yet to experience, glorified with God. That experience, as I sat reflecting on it this past week, I just wondered and wondered and wondered and longed and wondered what it's going to be like. And then I thought how practical it was for Jesus to experience that. And that's my prayer for each of us this morning as we come together. As you take the bread, as you take the cup this morning, as you hold it in your hands, think of your brother. Think of Christ as your brother. He's been there through all the issues before you. He faced it all. Perhaps there's an issue that you're struggling with now. Lord, give me counsel. Direct me to someone who can help me with this. But it's about building relationships to the honor and to the glory of God. Now, I'm going to continue with the intercessory prayer, and then we will have the Lord's Prayer, we'll have the offering, and then we will have the communion.